Welcome to the Jill on Money Show. This is the program that takes the mystery out of your financial life. And every so often, we like to bring you some interviews that we conduct in other places. Sometimes they're video interviews. Today and tomorrow, we're going to bring you the story of Jim McCann. He's the founder of 1-800-Flowers. We conducted this interview at the Compound Studios. So that is our YouTube show, Jill on Money, powered by the Compound. Today, we are talking about Jim McCann's backstory. Tell me a little bit about your background. So you are born New York guy.
You can't tell?
I hear a little bit of it. So where were you born?
Faraway land called Queens.
Yeah, where in Queens?
South Ozone Park.
Okay.
So between Aqueduct and the airport.
And what did your parents do for a living?
Mom, a homemaker, dad, a painting contractor. So family business.
And did you go into that immediately, or?
I had no choice. When you have a dad that's a contractor and he doesn't want you hanging around on the streets, you get put to work.
And what did you think about the contracting business when you were doing it?
I realized I wanted to do something else.
Like what?
Because when you're the boss's son, you do everything that the men don't want to do. All the filthy things. Well, we're doing a restaurant. Someone needs to climb up the oven hood and scrape all the grease out. Well, none of the men are going to do that, but the idiot kid will.
Yeah, especially the boss's kid.
Yeah, exactly.
We're gonna put that through a little bit of a grinding
We'll get the
motion.
psychiatrist in here and see what he can do with me.
So tell me a little bit about kind of how you entered into the workforce after you went to college, right?
Several times.
Several times. Where'd you graduate from?
As I say, college was 7 of the best years of my life.
Yeah. So you're going to be one of these guys who says, you don't need college, kids, or do you think they do?
I think it gives you a chance to finish.
Yeah.
It's finishing school. It was great for me. I went to Monmouth College, now Monmouth University, New Jersey Shore, until they decided my academic credentials were too powerful, and they suggested I'm no longer welcome there. And then I moved over to City University, John Jay College, thought I'd be a policeman. It was quite the reach from my community. It was an aspirational kind of goal.
Yeah.
Along the way, I got into another career that I happened to love and continued with that until the police career was no longer an option.
And what was that career? Talk about that.
In the social services. I ran a home for teenage boys out in Queens and Rockaway Beach. So I started as a living counselor in a group home. Loved it. Learned a lot. I learned so much more about myself than anything else. I grew a beard back then to look older than my kids because one was just 6 months younger than me. It worked very well. Now I look really old. And so I did that, and I was a live-in counselor. And then I got a promotion and ran a group home. Then I ran all the group homes. Then I became the administrator of the home. So I did social services at St. John's Home for Boys for 14 years.
Wow.
And loved it.
And then what happened?
I wanted to eat. And I had kids who wanted to get clothes and go to school.
Yeah.
And
social service is tough.
It's very rewarding.
Yeah.
But not-for-profit social work, you starve.
Right.
And so I was always doing things on the side. And having learned some things working for Dad, I'd buy buildings and fix them up and sell them off or rent them out. And I returned and fulfilled a genetic requirement. As an Irish Catholic kid from South Queens, I became a bartender. And actually, bartending led me to my only 2 careers. First at St. John's, a friend of mine who was a customer at one of the neighborhood bars. Every time he came in, I'd ask him about it, his work at St. John's. And finally, he invited me down to visit him one night and have dinner with he and the guys. And after dinner, he asked me to come down to the basement level where his office was. And we sat down and he said, do you think you'd like to give this a try? I said, I think I would. And he said, well, you got to do me a solid then. And he flipped me the keys and said, I got no one to work tonight, you're on. And that's how I decided on that job, which then became a career. And I was going to school at John Jay. And John Jay was set up for police and firemen and other frontline kind of workers. So they'd run the same class twice a day, 8 hours apart, same teacher, same class. So if you were working different shifts, you could go Monday and Wednesday or Tuesday and Thursday, and you could, even if your shift changed, you could make your class. And so that worked out perfectly for me because my shifts were always changing. And so 7 years later, graduated from John Jay, was still enjoying my career. That gave me some free time to go back to bartending on the Upper East Side on Friday and Saturday nights, tossing bottles. Mary Lou and I married very young. We started a family very young. And so I was making good change on Friday and Saturday nights. And lo and behold, another guy who became a friend across the bar owned a flower shop across the street. And I'd ask him about
Don't
it
tell
all
me
the
that's
time.
Jerome Flowers on the
No,
corner.
nearby, though.
Okay.
Nearby. This was between 62nd and 63rd on First, catty corner from the original TGI Fridays.
Okay. I know exactly where it is.
And so he told me he was selling the shop. And so I asked him, how much would you be asking for that flower shop? He said, I think $10,000.
What did you know about flowers?
Nothing.
You just said it's a prime location?
It was an okay location, but it was retail.
Yeah.
I had just sold a building in Brooklyn, and I had a $10,000 profit. So when he told me he's asking $10,000, I thought it was a sign from God.
Okay.
So-
And maybe it was.
And I bought the flower shop with the idea, Jill, of not just being a florist, which of course I became, but to build a company.
How did you wait a second. Why would you think of building a company when you're buying a single shop? What is it in your mind that was going on?
A long walk starts with a single step. So
Yeah.
I was in the idea I wanted to build a business.
Okay.
Growing up in a family business, you saw the challenges of not being able to build a business or not going fast enough. And I just always, even in the home, we always wanted to build. We wanted to serve more kids. We wanted to help more families. So it's sort of in my DNA, perhaps family DNA, that if we're going to be involved in something, we want it to grow. Because if it's not growing, it's not in good shape, no matter what it is. Not-for-profits, social work.
I just want to go back to your time in social services. What drew you to that? I mean, do you have a family member who has some issues? Or are you just a do-gooder? Are you a Jesuit? Like, what's going on for you?
No, I'm Catholic. I'm not a Jesuit.
Okay. They don't get that joke, by the way.
They're almost Catholic.
I understand.
I think it was my parents. And I say that because, yes, you figured it out. I'm the oldest of five. My middle brother, so I have two sisters, two brothers. My middle brother, Kevin, was born with developmental disabilities. And back then in the 50s and 60s, it was the dark ages of how people with mental retardation, as it was referred to then, or any kind of developmental disabilities were treated. And I remember my parents forming a community group where they'd rent a room in a church nearby, and on Saturday mornings they'd invite other families who had children with disabilities in to gather so that they could play, they could have a bit of a respite, a cup of coffee, at that time unfortunately a cigarette, and share information, give comfort, and
It's like just a support group in many ways.
very much a support group.
Oh.
And we'd see this, and I'd see that my parents were organizing this and needed connection and needed the help and support of other people. And we were very, very tight on means at the time. And so I think that's where it started, because we'd always be dragged along, and our job was always to look out for them. Back then, a lot of people were bullied and picked on in the
Yes,
community.
of course.
And it was our job to make sure that didn't happen, not only for my brother, but for other people who we saw were in need. So I think that was the blueprinting.
So you buy this flower shop. What year is that?
1976, April 1st, 1976.
It's the bicentennial.
It is indeed.
And so how does that go? How did you learn about running this business?
Well, I'd worked in retail a lot. In Richmond Hill, Queens, I worked, when I wasn't working for my father or doing other jobs, I'd work at a men's and boys clothing store, big store. And so I learned a lot about retail working there, and I did it for many years. In fact, even after I was working at St. John's, and I had the flower shop businesses on the side, and every once in a while I'd still tend bar. But for Father's Day, it used to be very slow in the flower business. So I'd go work the weekend in his store. His name was Eb Wiseman, great, interesting fellow. And I'd go work in the store because I loved the action. I loved the camaraderie of the team. There'd be 20 or 25 of us working those weekends. And I just loved the action. And I had the time on my hands because we weren't busy in the flower shops on all this day. Now we are, because we have a lot of other gifts.
So the flower shop, you buy the shop, there are people working there already.
Yep.
They basically teach you about this business,
Absolutely.
right?
Yep.
And so obviously the big factor has to be that your inventory dies, which is a little scary. It's kind of like the restaurant business
Now
in
you're
that way.
depressing me. I had no idea this would happen.
Yeah, I know. Right? But isn't that true? It's like there's very few businesses where your inventory dies.
Well, there's a lot of businesses. There's a thing
Food
called the food business.
And food, funerals, and
well, now they've already died. Yeah.
So how
and
did
they
you?
hardly ever complain.
No, but their families often do. How did you manage that?
I hired a fellow who I worked with at St. John's and said, would you like to would you like to manage this business? And we learned together.
And how long did it take you to feel like you really understood the business?
Well, I'm still learning, and because it's still changing. So the answer is never. But we felt like we knew enough to open our second shop 6 months later.
And where was that? Also in Manhattan?
Staten Island.
Ooh, interesting. And and why Staten Island? Just because there was a store available?
Exactly.
And what was the name of the first flower shop?
We called it Flora Plenty.
Flora Plenty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like good and plenty, Flora
Plenty. And did you call that Staten Island location?
That's the name we used.
Okay. Now, how do we go from a couple of shops to the expansion where this really starts to take off?
Remember, I kept my full-time job at St. John's.
Of course you did, because you were scared.
Beyond scared. Also broke.
Yeah.
But it enabled me to try and build a business. I didn't have to worry about paying the mortgage or putting the basic foodstuffs on the table. And I just worked all the time. So not smarter, but harder working than most. And that family pounded into me. The men work these hours, we work these hours. And so I bought the shop with the idea to build a business. So how do I build a business at that time? Shop at a time. So every 6 months we'd open another shop, and then every 3 months. And then all of a sudden I realized, Jill, this is really dumb. Because I have 40 or so shops, and there's no economy of scale. In fact, we're just running crazy because you're bleeding everywhere.
So 40 shops all over New York, metropolitan area.
Yep.
Okay. And by what year is it that you have 40 shops?
1986, so 10 years later.
40 shops. Wow. Okay.
And then we changed the name of the company from Flora Plenty to 800 Flowers, and then to 1-800-Flowers.
Okay.
And we made the change from 800 Flowers to 1-800-Flowers.
Because
I thought everyone understood that it was a telephone number, because that was the golden age of 800 numbers.
yeah, of course.
But a lot of people ask me, why did you call it 800 Flowers and why not 799 Flowers?
Oh, gosh.
And I said,
okay.
uh-oh.
We got a problem.
And we appended a 1.
And so what year was 1-800-Flowers born?
1986.
So then what else was happening in the industry at that time? If I wanted to send flowers to somebody, it's 1986. I'll tell you how I did it.
Sure.
I'll remember this well. There was a flower store near my parents' house. In Scarsdale.
What was it called?
It was called Colonial Village Florist.
I remember the shop.
And I would call up Joe and I'd say, Joe, it's my mother's birthday. My sister and I want to send flowers. He'd know what she likes.
Yep.
He's like, great, I'll take care of it. Is it her birthday? Is it her anniversary? That's how I did it. But I called him directly.
Yep.
Was it...
And you probably had a house account then, because a lot of shops didn't take credit cards.
That's exactly right. We did have a house account. We had to make sure not to charge my parents for their own gift. But
Oops.
1-800-Flowers, was there... Did you call... What was Teleflora? Was that a business that was a competitor?
It still exists. Yep. They're a little bit direct to consumer. Mostly they're a back-end facilitator for shops.
Okay. So what was your competition besides the standalone shops for someone who was also trying to create economies of scale in the business?
A company called FTD.
Oh, right. Of course. And what differentiated 1-800-Flowers from FTD?
Well, both Teleflora and FTD were competitors. They did the same thing, and they'd want to recruit flower shops, and they'd sell them a bunch of stuff, charge them fees, and facilitate them transferring an order. When you call Joe, and he said, well, I can't make that delivery. It's too far from me. He'll call another shop and get them to do it. They used FTD and Teleflora for the back end of those transactions.
Okay.
And our thought was, why not make it easy for people to order flowers? Not everyone had house accounts. Not everyone was that affluent. And they didn't know who to call. And so we figured, wouldn't it be good if there was someone who was the guarantor, who was available 24/7, who took credit cards, who knew the shops to call and which ones not to call, who invested in a team of people who were out there knowing the shops, guaranteeing the order, testing the shops on their quality and their standards and their design capabilities. And we thought, maybe there's a need for that kind of a business. So there wasn't one before us. So we took that aspect of the flower shop business and made it ours.
And so in that respect, is an FTD or a Teleflora basically looking at you and saying, who is this guy? How dare he?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they offered to buy us to put us out of our misery because they told us it'll never work.
Oh, of course. How much did they offer you?
They offered me $50,000.
In 1987?
87 or 88, 89 maybe. maybe 90.
Any temptation to take 50 grand in 1990?
No.
None. Because you had it. Because 4 years into the mission, now you're like, wait a second, this is doing well?
86 we launch, and I'd say by 90, you're saying, wait a minute, this is going to work. And by 91, Jill, we had a branding event that pushed us over the top. So here we have no money, and we become a national brand because we rode the wave of, just like when the internet was new, everyone wanted to do something online. Well, this is the iteration before that, the new technology of before. It was the 800 numbers. And all of a sudden, we're a national brand. We've dwarfed FTD in their business. They go into direct competition with us now and go, hey, we got to do the same thing. Let's go direct to the consumer. They've also gone bankrupt twice, but catty as I am, I'll just mention that.
I thank you for that. And I'd like to know that you're a human being also, which is nice.
And my wife would argue, but what the heck, she doesn't know what she's talking about. We said, wait a minute, if we could do this, what's the next technology that could disrupt us? So we're on our way to becoming a pretty well-established brand. And in 1991, you won't remember because you're a young kid, but this first Persian Gulf War was on the verge of breaking out.
Yep.
We were all very, very nervous. CNN had 100% market share of the cable news business at the time because they were the only.
Yep.
And I met at a conference a fellow by the name of Ted Turner.
Oh, that's funny.
And what a special guy, what a visionary. And he said to me, kid, we're going to teach the world. He was upset because the only advertisers he had at that time were direct response advertisers.
Yeah.
Ginsu knives and album clubs.
They've kind of gone back to that now.
Pretty much. But those Ginsu knives are pretty darn good.
I don't want to comment. I've not used them.
And he said, we're going to teach the world that you can build a brand and sell a pork chops, as he called it. And so we started advertising on CNN. The Persian Gulf War is about to break out. Everyone's a nervous wreck.
Yeah.
And I get a call from Carol, who has worked with Ted, and she said, Ted would like you to do him a favor. And I said, me do Ted a favor? What on earth would that be? She said, a lot of advertisers are canceling their schedule. And they're concerned about being associated with this war. Ted would ask that you not cancel. So I said, I trust Ted. I think his judgment's been good on so many things. So I said, okay, Carol, fine. She goes, 2 days later, calls me back with another favor. And this time it's Ted. He said, kid, if I can't convince enough other people to stay, can I just run your commercials wherever I have a hole? War breaks out. It goes very, very well for the Americans. We're filled with pride again and relief. And it was a war brought to you by 1-800-Flowers.
Wow.
We were the only advertiser on
Wow.
there. And he went from a 0.7 share to a 34, 35 share. So it was a huge branding event.
How did you manage the inflow?
We did it.
What
It
happened?
was just overwhelming.
I mean, you couldn't prepare for
you
that.
can't ramp.
Okay.
But it became a branding event. So now we're on the lookout. I have a younger brother, Chris, who joined me after college right around that time. And we're looking, saying, what's the next technology? And he was good at technology, just out of university, and he's playing around with new things. So we kept track. We had over 50 different tech tests, like a CD-ROM, and put a catalog on it.
Right.
So he had lots of failures. But the one thing he kept coming back to was this whole idea of this online world. He and I befriended 3 guys who were running this little upstart called AOL. Steve Case, Bob Pittman, Ted Leonsis. And they convinced us that we should go with them. That even if we couldn't figure out where the world was going, they were in a better position than us. So we should hitch our wagon to their star.
What'd you think at that moment? Like, what do I have to lose?
No,
or
we had to walk away from other relationships.
Like who?
CompuServe,
Oh gosh, remember
which was owned
CompuServe?
by IBM and Sears. How could it fail?
Right, and also
22 months later.
Right, name brands that you actually knew.
Yeah, big, powerful companies. And got
Right.
these 3 guys who invite us down to dinner, and between them, they can't cover the check. And we went with them. They've done all right
But
since
why?
then.
But why? What drew you to them versus CompuServe? Say.
We had known Ted Leonsis for some years before that. He had a great software company out of Florida, and we got to know him. He's a New Yorker, Sunset Park kid. And got to know Bob Pittman well. I knew him from other life stops, other companies. He used to run Six Flags Adventure Park before that, and I was a distant investor in that, so I got to know him, and I like him a lot and respect the heck out of him. And Steve Case is a giant and a visionary, and I thought we had a relationship there. I didn't have a relationship in Westchester with CompuServe.
Right.
But I did with these crazy three entrepreneurs.
So would you
in
say
Virginia.
that a lot of your success, that when you think about being entrepreneurial and you say, I'm focused, I want to create a business, but a lot of this is also your gut reaction to human beings and who you would choose to associate with and to invest in.
And to invest in a relationship with. Absolutely. It's all about relationships for me. Everything I've learned is in the context of a relationship. Whether it was running a home for boys and having a mentor who was the executive director who took me under his wing when I wanted to quit because I thought I was pretty crappy at the work. Yes, it's Eb Wiseman in Richmond Hill, who was a tough bird but kicked my bush a lot to the extent that I learned. And I worked crazy hours. And so I've always had, my dad was a strong influence, don't listen to what the men say. They need to talk about the boss. They need to complain. And just because you're the boss's kid, you can't take it personal. All those kinds of lessons that you just learn if you're listening and you're interested and curious.
And so when you hook your wagon to AOL, talk a little bit about what those mid-'90s were like for your business.
This is started in the early 90s. We had a website, and it didn't matter because no one could find you. AOL was the gateway for so many people. And in the early days, Jill, people said, I want to do something online. What could I can send flowers to somebody. So we were the first thing you can transact with on AOL. We were the first thing you could transact with a bot on Facebook. So we pride ourselves on being early. So if you're early, it means you're going to have lots of missteps, but you only remember the victories. And so AOL was a victory. And I remember, fast forward to the end of the 90s now, January 99. My brother Chris and I are on the way to the Super Bowl. I think it was in Miami. And we stop in Virginia to invest in our relationship with these three crazy guys who we like so much. And Bob Pittman walks us out to our cab. And I said, after getting all our advice from him on how we should do things, he said, I think you guys should consider going public. Now, we'd been thinking about it because it was the boom time for e-commerce. Boom time. And we're thinking about it, and Bob was the last push we needed to hear, because he said, I think you should go public because you're doing this out of your own pocket, no outside money. Why don't you grab some money? Because we had recounted to him that we had 0 competitors. Now we had 21 competitors 2 years later in 1999, all financed by venture capitalists or private equity firms. And he said, you don't know how long this war for eyeballs is going to last, and you don't want to run out of ammo. So his counsel was the last push we needed. And I said, Bob, what's next for you? And he gets a little conspiratorial and says, I'd like to buy Time Warner.
Oh, my God.
And they announced it later that year. And we went public in August, the day Yahoo missed their earnings for the first time. So it disrupted the market, to say the least. And March of 2000 was when the dot-com boom ended. The month the AOL transaction closed.
When you went public, how did you pick your investment bankers?
Well, in the e-commerce space, there were a few that were really hot. And based on a relationship that had developed in the process of looking through, I had a friend and a younger hero of mine who was a Wall Street guy who had just left. He ran Morgan Stanley, then he ran Citicorp. But he had just left that business to create a new dot-com investment bank called Witt Capital.
Okay.
And his name was Bob Lessin.
Okay.
Terrific guy. And Bob said, geez, I wish
his last name is Lessin?
Lessin.
I feel like that's a great name for an investment banker, because you will get lesson if you work with me.
And hanging around him, I got lessoned in a learned kind of way. He's the smartest guy. And he said, I wish I was a banker. I'd love to take you public, but here's the 3 I think you should talk to. I talked to the 3, and we wound up going with Goldman Sachs, because there was a fellow there by the name of Lawrence Calcano, who was in charge of the e-commerce, internet banking team. And I just liked this guy, and we developed a relationship. And I wanted
All right, you go public. You went public at the top. essentially.
It had probably just peaked before that.
Okay,
but
whatever.
We
but
got
like
out the door pretty
close.
good.
I don't know if you feel comfortable telling us this, but like how much money personally did you take out of this?
You're right. I'm not comfortable telling you that.
Give me about
No,
a lot of money.
A lot of money.
What was the offering? What was it? What was the value of the offering?
I think we peaked that day around 2.4 billion. We raised all the money we needed in one shot. Took a lot of off the table personally, so that it was a life changer for us as a company and as a family, because it changed everything.
And what about all the people who worked there? Did they all have a piece of the action?
A lot of people made a lot of money.
And you feel good about that, don't you, when that happens, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So now you take a bunch of money off the table. The boom goes to bust.
Yep.
But how does your business go in the dot-com bust? Are people like, oh, now I'm not going to send flowers? It seems like they're still sending flowers.
They are, and it turned out to be a great branding event too, because we were something everyone could understand.
Yes.
There were a lot of things you couldn't understand. Pets.com gets a lot of criticism for being such a ridiculous idea, and now there's a company called Chewy who's doing pretty good doing exactly that. But for us, it was good. We raised all the capital we need, so it almost didn't matter what happened to the stock price, other than emotionally. So we had enough money to win the wars.
Yep.
To beat back the competitors, to continue to grow. And so we grow every year since our first day open in 1976. We grew every year, including those dot-com bust years. I think our low point in EBITDA during 2009 or 10 was 35 million, so never got that close. And we continue to grow today. We're a couple of $1 billion now, and we have a portfolio of brands all in the gifting space.
Okay. So what's the difference once you have the public invested with you? How do you feel about like the management? Did you feel like you knew enough to manage a publicly traded company? Did you need to bring people in? I mean, how was that transition for you?
We needed to bring people in who knew what they were doing. And then they were around for a while, and then it becomes organic. So our CFO, who wasn't public company CFO ready then, we hired a CFO who had done it before. He worked with him for years until he retired, and then he stepped into his role. And now he's thinking about retirement now. So it's you learn.
Yeah.
And you have the Goldman people around you. You have Cahill Gordon, our law firm, who does all of that. They handle public companies every day. So you get good advisors around, you make mistakes, and you learn. But it's been a very good thing for us.
Okay, that was just part one. Tomorrow we will air the second part of our interview with 1-800-Flowers founder Jim McCann. And if you're thinking about starting a company and maybe you want to be the next Jim McCann, why don't you give us a holler? Go to JillOnMoney.com, click the Contact Us button, and tell us what's going on. Maybe we might be able to guide you. While you're on the website, don't forget you can sign up for the free weekly newsletter, and we are just days away from our next webinar. Again, to join us for that webinar, you have to be a member of Jill on Money Live. It'll cost you $35. It is on Tuesday night, September 24th, 7 Eastern Time, and we are focusing on real estate, so this is going to be huge, a huge event. So check that out. You can subscribe to us on the Odyssey app or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Lift someone up, change your work, change your wealth, change your life. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.